City Lutherie in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And this is a two-part video. You're coming in on part 2 of this 1959 Gibson ES335. Part 1, I addressed the bridge placement. In this video, I am going to be doing the refret, binding, repair, and just the final touches on this instrument. So if you want to know what else was done to this instrument, I'll add a link here, the little box thing. And you can also go to the part 1 of the video if you already watched that. Thanks for coming back. Time to get to the rest of the repairs. See that little notch at the end of the fret there? That is from the previous refret. These are still the frets that the guitar came into the shop with. And that is a telltale sign of somebody nicking the binding with either a saw or a 3-corner file, probably a 3-corner file, trying to dress the slots to get them to get the frets to fit in nice and flush to the fingerboard. I talked to the customer who owns this, and he'd much prefer that when I get the frets out, I'm going to try and use a little acetone and some binding to kind of see if I can melt a little piece into each of these little spots and then rebuild what's here. Otherwise, to get rid of those, we got to take the binding off the whole side of the neck. I've done it before. It's a major job. On something like this, it's always best just to not do more and more tasks like that. This neck has already been resprayed, so we're just trying to avoid any more major work like that. Just maintenance stuff like the refret. So I'm going to get these frets out and going to tend to these little notches. So I want to start off with a clean area. There's a little bit of dirt and gunk in those, so just a little bit of sandpaper. Just wiggle it in there till I see that it's cleaned out. I don't want to make this any bigger, just making it clean. For the filler, I have some binding. It's just a little scrap that I have left over from a different job. I'm just going to put it in a little airbrush jar of acetone. As you can see, after just a matter of a few minutes, it gets all gooey. See that? Then I've got a little bit of putty to work with. Kind of just pack this in those little notches and fill them in. As you can see there, we've got one of the little notches. So I'm going to take my X-Acto knife, just scrape off just a tiny bit of binding here. Just very carefully. So here's what we have after letting that binding sit and kind of melt together. Let it sit for a few days. Because not only is the stuff that I put on is that melted, but when I put it on the binding that's on the neck, that's going to soften up a lot too. So you don't want to work on it right away. Make sure it all sets up. And now so all I'm going to do with the fingerboard for now is just clean it really well with steel wool. I'm not wanting to sand it until I can check things out with straight edge. We've got a bunch of gunk and filth built up that kind of crept underneath the frets. So I'm just getting that all off so I can get an honest reading with straight edges on this, and then I'll determine if anything needs sanding. If I sand it, it's going to leave a freshly flattened out spot, and then I got to go back and I have to try and make that look old. That's why I'm just doing steel wool for right now. All right, time to start prepping the fret wire for this, and we're also going to diagnose the fingerboard if it needs any work done. Being a 1959, the owner of this requested as little alteration as possible. Guitar gets played on a lot. In between the frets, you're going to end up wearing away some of the wood. That is not what we're considering here. It is where the frets will sit, the fret slots. We're going to check those. So I've got out my radius gauge, and I'm going to put that right where the fret would rest. Normally a Gibson should be a 12-inch radius, but for multiple reasons we've got ourselves a 10-inch. Having been refretted, this could have been refretted long ago, and the nibs taken off by someone who didn't have the tools to trim the fret tang, and they just rounded down the fingerboard because they just went at it too heavy-handedly. Also, wood changes over time. It's not going to stay perfectly level, perfectly radiused over time. But as you can see, normally Gibsons are 12-inch. You can see that rocks back and forth way too much. If I want these to sit in there well, I'm going to do this up at a 10-inch. Even though there's a tiny little gap there, 10 is what's going to fit on this. And once again, we're talking about where the fret slots are, not in between, because as you know, you can just wear down the wood. That doesn't mean that the fret level is going to be bad. So I'm going to take the truss rod all the way loose. See, we've got plenty of gap there. We're looking right in between. Got the lamp behind so you can see the difference here. Let me tighten this up. Got plenty of movement on this. Now we've got a back bow. It's up here at the octave. You can see that. So we've got this truss rod functions really well. Got a high spot at the octave. Let's come over here, check the bass side. We've got a really big spot there. Treble side is pretty close to the same, so I'm going to take this to the middle, or about middle, and this is looking like we've got plenty to work with here. I'm going through prepping these fret slots. I need to clear out any debris that's in here, but also with the melted binding that I put in here, a little bit seeped into the fret slot. I'm just using my little claw tool here because I don't want to bump the binding. I want to see that I'm just getting right up to it and cleaning out any little bit of debris there. I do have a little saw that can go in between here with the binding on, but I'm worried that I might pull back and bump this, and don't want to do that. So when I was pulling the frets from the guitar, they were all seated very well, but I didn't smell any glue. When you heat up the fret, you'll smell if there was super glue or something else used to hold the fret into place. This had nothing. All I smelled was rosewood. But I'm not comfortable just simply putting the frets back in without anything to make sure that all the gaps are filled in. So I'm going to use a glue syringe, fill it with some hide glue, and I'm going to fill the slot of each fret and put that in. Hide glue, it's era correct to the 50s. I mean, I could use super glue or something else, but I'm just going to kind of follow through with the correct age of the guitar. There isn't much to this process, just put the glue in a syringe. sure I pack it down into the slot. And with the fret all ready to go, put it in place. There we go. We'll just let that set for a few minutes. The glue won't be completely set up, but it'll be enough to hold it in place. New frets are in, and I have beveled the edges here. Now one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back with some more of the melted binding, because when you trim the tang back to have fret rest over the top of the binding, but this is so heavily rounded over at the very edge of the where the fingerboard meets the binding. That is so paper thin that there are spots where, I don't know if you can kind of see this, where the binding is actually down a little below the surface of the fingerboard. And what's happening is I'm being left with little tiny gaps, even though the bead of the fret comes out just a little bit over the binding. I'm left with just a little line there, so I'm going to take a little bit of binding and just kind of pack it in there, make everything look a little bit nicer and cleaner. It's not as big of an issue on the bass side because your string doesn't really roll off the side and catch, but I already did this to a couple frets on the treble side. That high E, if you're playing real hard and kind of slip over the edge, the string can catch where that end of if you have a little bit of a gap between the binding and the fret bead. Just review this again. We've got a little scrap of binding. I'm going to have an open jar of acetone here, so I'm definitely covering up the body, anything that doesn't need to be exposed. Also putting it in an extra bowl just in case I might hit it and get it to knock over or something. But really, we're just going to let it sit there. Doesn't take long at all. Turn to goo. So I'll just find a spot that's a little bit gapped, and I'm aiming more for the fret and then bring it down to the binding, because I don't want to alter the original binding if possible. I just want to get in that gap and have it kind of chemically burned together just at that one spot. Sometimes I'll dip the very tip of my X-Acto knife in the acetone just to kind of help brush it into place. Preparing the guitar to do the fret dress, and I'll be doing that on my string tension simulator, or a neck jig, whichever you want to call it. I'm probably being a little inefficient doing it this way where I put in the nut now ahead of time. But I need to get the nut on here so I can string it up, have it under tension. I'll be slotting it, spacing it out, getting the string height pretty close. I will be dressing the frets. Then later on, I will have to touch up the slot depth. So it's all right, we got it all strung up. Its neck is under plain tension. This is going to be a little bit different than it had I leveled the fingerboard, or if it was a brand new neck with a really nicely leveled fingerboard. I can then adjust the neck using my notch straight edge and set it up on the neck jig, and everything comes out really nice. This fingerboard I did not level. It doesn't really need it, and also by request of the owner not to do too many things to this guitar. So there's going to be guesstimation. Using my experience setting up guitars and stuff for many, many years, finding the ideal spot where to adjust this neck so I can do a fret dress. I'm going to have both appropriate adjustment both ways, and I'm not going to take off a lot of fret wire anywhere on the neck. It's kind of a, you don't want to sit here all day grinding fret off. Plus, you've just done a refret. You don't want to hand the guitar back to someone and you've basically ground most of the fret wire off. So it's just going to be like a normal setup. I'm just going to use my relief gauge, and then I'm going to check with the regular straight edge, the fret tops, and put it on the neck jig, double check everything. Once it's ready to go, start leveling. Gone through, adjusted the dials and everything, zeroed it out. I'm still at the same truss rod relief measurement, so we are good to go. And as long as he stays 0, we'll be fine. Now I can take the strings off and everything will be held in place as if it was under string tension. I have some extra lacquer that has got a little aged color to it, so I'm just going to use that on the nut as well. So we have a Tone Pros AVR2. It's a nickel-plated tunematic bridge, and going to prep this for the acid bath. Tone Pros uses a little clip to help hold everything in place here, and on the other side there's a little nylon washer. I'm going to take this apart and get the nylon washer out of there. You don't want that in the acid bath. And basically I'm just going to take this all apart. We'll put all the parts here in this tray, even the thumb wheels and the thumb wheel posts. And what's going to happen is, in a larger container, I kind of like doing these, we're going to put a little bit of the muriatic acid down in the bottom of this, then set that inside carefully and put a lid on this. This little aquarium gravel. Nothing really all that sharp in there, but just enough to kind of knock off some of that shine. There you go, we got the job done. Full refret, new nut, took care of the binding a little bit here and there, put the bridge back in the original location, a little touch up. If you take the bridge and thumb wheels off, you're going to see that something was done there, but the idea is that it looks like somebody, took the time and care to do something with it. It's a transparent finish. Adding a little bit of opaque color to the finish helps some, but you can't do too much, otherwise it just becomes a dot. The whole idea was, when I was doing this, is I didn't want to have that perfect circular outline that's really pronounced, just kind of faded away a little bit, and it's the average person that picks this guitar up isn't even going to notice that it's there. So it'd take a professional eye taking the guitar apart to evaluate things to find out, oh, hey, something was done here. So the guitar is playing great. It is time to get it back to the owner. So if you have any questions about this job or any of my other videos, you can either leave a question or just contact me directly. My information is in the About section of my channel, and we'll catch you next time.